So our final snippet for this week is going to look at how this new Congress functions alongside Clinton. And one of the biggest effects you can see from this chart, it's a phenomenon known as asymmetrical polarization. And what that basically means is that while both the Democrats and the Republicans in the House were becoming more partisan and were shifting towards the ideological extremes, as you can kind of see on the chart here, the Republicans were getting conservative faster than the Democrats were getting liberal. I suspect in the last few years this has now begun to even out, but at the time, the Republican caucus shifts to the right. There's a lot of very sharp anti-government rhetoric. Gingrich was in a lot of ways, he was a demagogue, but not necessarily an ideologue, but he was trapped by this hardline anti-government rhetoric. And there were two issues that Clinton was able to use to shift the political momentum in 1995. The first is this just awful event of domestic terrorism, the bombing of a federal building that housed federal workers. The FBI had offices there, by a far-right militia advocate named Timothy McVeigh, which kills more than 100 people. One of the saddest things about this bombing is that there was a daycare in the basement of the building as well, and there's a real backlash for quite understandable reasons in the aftermath of this bombing about whether this vitriolic anti-government sentiment had contributed to an intellectual atmosphere that was quite poisonous. And Bill Clinton, you can look it up on YouTube. The speech itself gives what might have been the best speech of his presidency in response to this, trying to bring the country together in a sort of healing fashion. And then the second, this famous Daily News cover, Gingrich authorizes a government shutdown. And the reason that so the government has run out of money, it needs a short-term appropriation. Gingrich blocks it in the House. And the reason that he gives is that the president had refused to speak with him on Air Force One as the two of them were traveling over to Israel for the funeral of Yitzhak Rabin, who had been assassinated in 1995. And that this was his response. And so the famous Daily News cover is, he was crybaby, and there's this sense of Clinton as the adult in the room and Gingrich as the whining child. More relevant here is that the economy just starts to do a lot better in 95 and 96. You can see from these charts, the gross domestic product rises, inflation rates drop, the Dow Jones stock market average increases, and the deficit dramatically falls. So basically what the Clinton team had said in 93 would occur with the passage of their budget deal begins to occur in 95, 96, 97. Now, there remains this debate about how much there's a relationship between the two of these things, but Clinton takes advantage of this. And then finally, Clinton surrounds himself, he basically fires his previous advisors and surrounds himself with two key figures, Dick Morris and Mark Penn, who advocate a strategy that comes to be known as triangulation, that the president will position himself as the centrist alternative between ultra-conservative House Republicans and what are portrayed as ultra-liberal House Democrats. And Clinton, again, is the adult in the room. This is great for Clinton. It's not too great for House Democrats because they're basically being, presented in a negative fashion. But there are a wide variety of things that Clinton does in 95 and especially in 1996 that try to break with Democratic traditional orthodoxies and present him as a more moderate figure. And maybe the two highest profile examples of this come in 96. Here's the first. This is from Clinton's State of the Union address in 1996. And listen closely to the tagline at the end of this clip.
We know big government does not have all the answers. We know there's not a program for every problem. We know and we have worked to give the American people a smaller, less bureaucratic government in Washington. And we have to give the American people one that lives within its means. The era of big government is over.
So the era of big government is over, coming from a Democratic president. It suggests that Clinton is sort of ceding the ideological terrain to Gingrich. But in fact, everything that Clinton says in his State of the Union addresses is rigorously focus group. That is, that the campaign brings together a group of undecided voters, gets a sense of what language they like, what language they don't. And Clinton also gives a laundry list of specific policy proposals that he favors. So he's campaigning in a far more centrist fashion in 1996 than he had governed in 1993 and 1994. And then the second area is that Clinton decides to compromise yet again on gay rights. And he comes out in favor of this law that is passed by the Republican Congress called the Defense of Marriage Act, which says that under federal law, the word marriage will only mean a legal union between one man and one woman. In 1996, gays and lesbians cannot get married anywhere in the country. But there had been a gay rights lawsuit in Hawaii, of all places, urging recognition of gay and lesbian marriages under state law. It's not a federal lawsuit. And Hawaii's constitution was a very progressive constitution. The Hawaii Supreme Court actually, in a preliminary ruling, makes clear they're going to endorse same-sex marriage, and then the ruling is wiped out in a state constitutional amendment. Republicans seize on this. They argue that Hawaii will basically impose marriage on the rest of the country. But Clinton not only signs this law, he uses his support for the law in radio ads that he runs in the fall campaign on Christian radio stations, especially in the South. So the candidate who had aggressively raised funds from gays and lesbians in 1992, by 1996 is campaigning against gay and lesbian rights as a way of showing his triangulation strategy. Clinton also benefits from his opponent. The ultimate Republican nominee is the Senate Majority Leader, Bob Dole. Dole has been in Washington forever. He's a war hero from World War II. But longtime legislators generally do not make strong presidential candidates. He chooses as his running mate Jack Kemp, a more modern-oriented voice within the Republican Party, but the two of them don't particularly mesh. And Clinton campaigns in this upbeat fashion as he's the voice of a new generation, and attacks Dole as someone who basically has been around too long. This is a Clinton campaign ad from 1996.
Let's go back in time, the 60s. Bob Dole's in Congress, votes against creating Medicare, against creating student loans, against the Department of Education, against a higher minimum wage, still there, against creating a drug czar, against the Brady Bill to fight crime, against family and medical leave, against vaccines for children, against Medicare again. Dole Gingrich tried to cut $270 billion. Bob Dole, wrong in the past, wrong for our future.
So you'll notice that at the end, they're really tying him to Gingrich. Democratic polling showed in 1996 that Gingrich was toxic, especially with suburban voters. So the idea was, Dole's the leader of the Senate Republicans, Gingrich was the leader of the House Republicans. The two of them are tied together. Dole tries to get around this by resigning his seat in the Senate, but that doesn't really help him very much. So in the end, this is a comfortable victory for Clinton, although he fades a bit late in the campaign after revelations of another ethical scandal, this time with regards to fundraising. Ross Perot is back running in 1996, but his campaign never really takes off the ground. He gets under 10% of the vote, probably draws most of that from the Dole people. Clinton, nonetheless, does particularly well, not just in liberal bastions in the Northeast, in the Midwest, and in the Pacific Coast. He does very well in Appalachia, starting in Western Pennsylvania down to West Virginia, Kentucky, and Tennessee, and over in Arkansas. He's going to be the last Democratic presidential candidate to win any of these states, starting with West Virginia, and I suspect will be the last Democratic presidential candidate for some time to win those states. But because Clinton is running this sort of narrow campaign message, where he's basically saying Democrats in Congress are pretty bad too. I'm the adult in the room. The Democrats don't do well in the Senate or House elections at all in 1996. Clinton has a mandate-free victory. Democrats only pick up a handful of seats in the House, and in the Senate, they actually lose 2 seats, Democratic seats in fairly conservative states, Nebraska, Arkansas, and Alabama, all switch to the Republicans when longtime Democratic incumbents choose not to run for re-election, and the Democrats pick up only 1 seat, a narrow win in South Dakota, which ironically creates a situation in which North and South Dakota, which are states that we now think of as very, very Republican conservative states, in which North and South Dakota from 1996 until 2004 will send 4 Democrats to the U.S. Senate. So the question is, what is Clinton going to do with this kind of meager mandate? And as we'll see next week, the answer to that is not too much. So in the meantime, hope everyone is well and staying safe, and I will talk to you soon.